Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, what do you think one of the biggest giveaways for an unprepared podcast could be? I would hasten to guess whatever this opening segment is will tip people off as to how much effort has gone into preparing particular topics for this podcast. But I don't know if you've got any other key points that you feel like the audience should be looking out for to try and figure out whether we are indeed doing the work behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, as I've said to you before, I think if you find me quizzing you and off the cuff catching you off guard, then you know that we're probably struggling for content that week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those weeks, and just to compound that particular situation, we're going to start with an SGL update. A real low way to kick up. Normally we come with a high energy subject, just kick straight in, and people are like, oh, we're hooked straight away. Yeah. This time we're going to the tried and tested Fantasy Gaming League to check on some reviews, because there actually has been a game that came out this past week, and it is AEW Fight Forever. Now, Paper transferred this one in, and I don't know if you remember, but I said,
It got queried.
I understand. Look, I've bought it, so there's something to be said there. But I knew full well that the reviews were most likely going to be struggling. I personally had put it as a 68. It ended up being a 65, so it's in the 5-point window, but it's on the lower end of that.
Paper was sorry, I missed that.
It's a 65.
God,
so for the Fantasy Game League, it's a stinker for Paper. He's transferred out Homeworld 3, which isn't coming out, so that had to go. Yeah. And he's replaced it with a 65 rated game.
So that's a 60 net.
Yeah, which isn't good enough really at this level.
Said it before, you need an 85 from those subs, really,
to make them worthwhile. But he was in a tough spot. Now, look, it is what it is. Paper's been stung with that. He said basically he knew that it wasn't going to be the best game ever, but he was going down with the ship, and he may well have just gone down with the ship, and his Grand Prix team may suffer. I mean, saying that, the games he's got left are Starfield, Pikmin, Football Manager, and Sea of Stars, which, you know, if Starfield is what it's promising to be, you're looking at 90 odds, and you know, we know Football Manager's, you know, a bag for a mid to low 80 usually. Sea of Stars is a bit of an unknown, but looking like it's good. So he could have a decent run at the end, but he's put himself in a tricky position with this one.
He's done the proverbial throwing the towel in, hasn't he? Or I like to call it doing an adcock.
Yeah, chucked it, just wanted it off his plate, I think, and then he could put feet up. But like I said, I've played about 3 hours of this game, just jumped on and had a go at it. And I can absolutely see why it's scoring where it is to some extent. It's not this is the thing, it's not broken. It's like, technically it seems pretty sound. My main concern with this was, well, how many bugs are going to be in this? Is it going to be just a disaster?
Yeah.
From the small amount that I've played, it's not that. It's just that I knew in the review space it was absolutely going to get compared to the WWE games, which have got 10, 15 years of development behind them. So it's bare bones. I think that's what's ultimately... We'll read through a couple of the reviews in a minute, but I think that's what's cost it most. But it's a tricky space to go in, isn't it? Like, you know, we used to have Pro Evo versus FIFA, but they both had established brands going for years and years and years. But the common thing with PES was that gameplay was superior, but it just lacked, you know, the sparkle of FIFA, and lacked the licenses, and lacked a lot of the modes that FIFA eventually built out. And I always wonder whether is there a space for secondary sort of... I mean, wrestling is a bit of a weird one because it's classed as a sports title, but we know that it's not a sport as such. It's presented as a sport and more of a fighting game, but they're always up against it here, really.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's never... I'm trying to go back. There did used to be a couple of different wrestling games, didn't there? There was... was for some reason TNA, but I've got that probably the wrong way.
No, there was a TNA game that came. I think a couple that came out.
Unbelievable, by the way.
Yep.
I don't know how I've pulled that out from the fucking bins.
No, You'll be pleased to know they've changed that name now. They're called Impact Wrestling, but back in the day, it was called TNA. They released a couple of games, I think, which, to be fair, scored about the same. They weren't, they weren't up to the standards of like 80s or 90s, but people seem to have fun with them. But it's a bit of a niche hobby anyway, the old wrestling. So it's not.
I don't think it for gaming. I was never into wrestling in the same way that some of the other guys, obviously like you, Paper and whatnot, were and are. But I was still, if it was on Sky One or whatever at the weekend, it'd still go on for a bit, and I'd definitely always play the games. And I think there was a lot of people that were like that liked like throwing people through the table and doing all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, I just kind of feel that the WWE just got a bit of a monopoly on it in the end, which is fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's always WWE's brand is so strong anyway. Just even in just out in entertainment factors, like it's crazy, like how much that's grown globally. So that's always going to give it a leg up, just in terms of exposure, but also the development cycle they go through. They do a yearly release, which has its own problems, but it does mean that over the years they've managed to improve it. Now with WWE, they did have a blow. I think it was 2K20, where they, I think that's the one Adcock subbed in it, and it was like a low 50s. That was broken because they put a new developer on it. The guys that were developing it for the last few decades, well, not decades, I don't mean 20 years, but the last 10 years.
I can picture the image.
Ukes were the developers originally. They now develop this game, AEW. Right. So they got picked up by them, and Visual Concepts do WWE now.
Right, okay.
So that first year, though, when they did that handover and Ukes were gone, they clearly had no idea what code they'd been left. Like, it was a fucking absolute abomination.
All the paperwork and burnt it and said, best of luck.
Honestly, it's one of those jobs. You know when someone leaves at work and there's stuff they do and like they don't leave on good terms or it's quite sudden. It was, you could see it was literally that for that game, like how bad it was and just there's weird stuff going on. It was so bad, in fact, they stopped the yearly release. 2021 did not have a game come out. They took a year out to just get to grips with it, and then came back with 2021, and now we've got 2022, and now we've got 2023, which is actually their best rated in the entire series. Which I've got it. If that's the best rated, then I don't know what they've been. I don't know how bad the rest could have been. The last one I had was 2019, and it wasn't as buggy as this one.
I haven't played one for years.
Well, the concern is that I find the WWE games I don't find them that fun to play.
Yeah.
Like, I do a lot of simulation on it, where I set the matches up and then let them play out. Because playing it's a bit arduous. Now, the thing about AEW, steering back to this one, is that they have claimed that the gameplay is solid. The fighting and the mechanics are going to be fun to play, which I think, and I've only spent a handful of hours of it. It feels good, like in that sense to me. It feels like there's potential there. So let's get some perspective on reviews. Let's have a look. Joe Findlay from CG Magazine. AEW Fight Forever is a triumphant return to the wrestling ring for THQ Nordic, who are the publisher, and Ukes.
Sorry, that's who I was thinking of. It's the publisher, not the dev. Sorry.
Yeah.
Schoolboy era.
Well, they went under, didn't they, THQ originally? Then someone bought the name back and sort of birthed it THQ Nordic. So they did the UFC games originally, the Undisputed games, and they used to help with the WWE games. Recapturing the magic of their original simple gameplay and amazing customization with yet a third wrestling organisation. So one of the things that people have been referencing throughout this particular one is that it's like a throwback to No Mercy, which in the gaming and wrestling kind of circles is seen as like the gold standard. That was like the GOAT of the time and hasn't been beaten yet. So that's what they're aiming for with this as well. I mean, it's more of an arcade version of it, and clearly takes a lot of inspiration from it.
That form, though, do you not think? I mean, when I used to play it, it used to all just be a bit. It might well be. I haven't played it for many years, but it just used to be a bit like silly and an arcade in terms of how the fights went.
Yeah.
And I did find it trying to. I think one of the reasons that I kind of went off it was because it became more like a wrestling simulator. And I remember just being a bit like,
yeah, I mean, that's
really what I'm after.
I mean, that is clearly what the gap they've aimed for here, and whether they've pulled it off is up for debate. But it definitely plays differently to the WWE games, which are more of a simulation of a simulated fight, which is crazy. It's a bit strange in that perspective. Do you know what I always thought? I want them to do a game, like a wrestling game, where instead of trying to just win the match, you're trying to have a good match, and the actual game's focused around being like a pro wrestler, as in...
So like an entertainer, so you get like score for entertaining.
Yeah, so you try and put together parts of the match, and you're trying to get a flow going and whatnot, and there's certain things. I think that would be an interesting take on it, because obviously that's how wrestling works. It's not a real sport. It's simulated and choreographed.
It's an entertainment industry, right? It's a good point. To be fair,
but no one's ever done it.
Well, I imagine that's just a tricky thing to. Winning and losing is binary.
Yeah,
like, there's trying to code in something where you're subjectively trying to build an entertainment.
Get a match rating.
Get a match rating. It'd become more arbitrary in terms of how many taunts did you do, or there'd be things like that. I don't know.
No,
that's a good point though.
Because there are like booking simulators that are text based where you do that. You put together the card and you instruct like the wrestlers how to wrestle, what type of match, and then it will score like the matches based on their abilities and whatnot. That's the closest thing we've got. I've spent many hours in those as well, but this is not that. This is a going down the avenue of a fighting game. Let's have a look and see what Brad Norton said from Dex Erto.
Graham Norton?
No, Brad Norton. Is Graham still knocking about?
Well, yeah.
Well,
got his own show.
BBC, yeah, he's doing all right. CG Magazine gave it a 9 out of 10, so that was that one. Brad's given it a 2 out of 5 stars. So that's, this is where the star system hurts these lower ranked games, isn't it? Because that's a 4.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's necessarily how it's supposed to be perceived, but with the way these aggregated reviews work, that's how it goes. Over time, there's certainly room to build from this foundation, but with the asking price and the initial lack of substance, it's hard to see value in AEW's first game upon release. So he's criticising the price. It's 50 UK pounds.
Yeah.
Which is actually £20 off the top shelf nowadays. This is what people seem to be forgetting. Now, I'm trying to find what it is in America, because I think we're benefiting from a exchange rate there. Yeah. So we'll just find that as we're chatting. But yeah, that's been crap. I think it's $60. So it's $60 from what I can see here, which again is $10 off the top shelf. People aren't cottoning on to this $70 price point and 70 UK pound price point, but it's in that bracket at the upper end, isn't it?
Yeah, it's it's basically saying it should be like a half price, £30-35 jobby. I'll be letting you comment on that, but
I can see why, because there's it's a handful of modes. There's a shortish career mode. There's customization options. Yeah, it would have undoubtedly benefited from being a bit cheaper, but at the same time,
can you knock it because it's too expensive?
As I always say, you can make it as cheap as you want. And this will appear on some sort of subscription service. I've no doubt there'll be a update at some point, and it will coincide with Big Phil writing out a check and all that sort of stuff. But my view on the price thing is, I think it's tricky, isn't it? Because if you're asking for... Because they're setting the value of it almost by putting it into the £50. They're saying it's of a standard of 50 UK pounds. That's the benchmark, they're saying.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And people would be more forgiving if it was 30 quid, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's many games that look like this and would be 35 quid. That's just not where we are. The middle ground has sort of disappeared. We've got full-on indies, which are anywhere up to 30, usually around 20. Then you've got 50 plus, which caters for all sorts. Like Resident Evil 4 was 55 quid. That seemed relatively cheap compared to 70 quid. All of Sony's stuff for 70 quid. All of Phil's stuff's now 70 quid at the top end. So the middle ground sort of is this £50 mark, but for many people it's seen as the top price.
It's a good point, actually, because I think I still live in a world where £55 is top whack.
Yeah.
Like in my brain, I'm like, that's where that is. But it's taken me a while to shift away from the £40. Like £40 used to be the new release, or £44.
Yeah.
And then it's just, as you say, it slowly goes north. But it's something that I've noticed actually is you've lost the 25, £30 middle ground that just doesn't exist anymore. Do you think this would have been better served as something a bit cheaper?
Well, I think so. I think if you look critically, it would have done, because there's, whether we like it or not, there's definitely that factors into some scores, particularly when things fall short.
Would it change your initial perception? Would you be like, this is better value? I mean, arguably it would be. Anything that's cheaper and you get the same product, you'd go, yeah, subjectively, but...
Probably, but it doesn't make the game any better. It doesn't change the fact that the game is what it is. And I get why it's mentioned, because people want to know how far their pounds are going to go these days and whatnot. And it's just you know, and if they're marketing it at a set price and asking for a set price, I think it's kind of fair to mention it. But I've always looked at the enjoyment factor and tried to. That should be like the way it's weighted mostly. It's just a weird market because value of money is so subjective anyway. 50 quid to me is different to 50 quid from you, and certainly different to people like Biff, who are always complaining about money. So that's already even the same amount of money is different to everyone. Then you inject the game, and some people say, well, it's bare bones, hasn't got enough. Other people say it's got enough. Other people will say, well, the quality of the game's good. Like, it's an impossible line to toe consistently, I find.
I mean, you know, there's going to be overlap. What do they call them bloody diagrams? Venn diagram or some bullshit. Yeah. There's going to be an overlap, but you're right. There's there is a hell of a lot of subjectivity, but I don't know. I suppose it's tricky when you're pricing these things as well to sort of go, well, it's what can you get away with?
Well, there's there's an interesting theory, and I've heard developers and publishers speak about this on random podcasts.
Right.
And they say there's a perception that if you release a game and it's 20 quid, people don't go to it because they think it's lesser quality. If you bump it up to 30 quid, you get more interest, because the perception is that the game is going to be of a higher quality. So there is definitely a line where people won't necessarily gravitate towards a game because it's cheaper than a game that's slightly more expensive. So particularly on the lower end, the indies have to really grapple with that, because they can charge a £5 or they can charge up to 25 quid, and there is a sweet spot there where the sort of larger audience will only consider stuff, you know, unless it's getting really hyped up in terms of word of mouth. Sometimes the price being dearer actually is more appealing, which is a strange way to look at it, but I can understand what they're suggesting there.
No, I know what you mean. It's kind of like, if something's really cheap, it makes you go, why is it that cheap?
You get what you pay for. That goes back to that, doesn't it? Usually you get what you pay for in certain, you know, obviously you don't on Amazon. You get all sorts of trash come off there. That's one of the downgrades of that. You try and look for anything on there and you get 50,000 fucking options, and most of it's complete toss.
Stores and things, and you go, right, give me the official merch or nothing.
I was looking for a plug. You know these things you put into a plug socket to check if there's any wiring issues, whatever they're called. Yeah. First of all, I chucked it into Amazon. I was like, there's 6 million options here. And I thought, what am I doing here? Let's just go to Screwfix. There was 6. And I went, right, that's easier.
Yeah. With some things, I find myself just going, I'll just go B&Q. I'll just go, like, there's some things where I just go, it ain't worth it, because too much choice is almost a bad thing in this instance.
Deary me. Anyway, one more review. Let's do Let's do Marcus Stewart from Game Informer. 6.3 out of 10, which is a very odd score. Why don't you give it a 6.2, Marcus, or a 6.4? Hello.
I'm sit in a room with some of these people and just go, how have you got? Talk me through the logic.
They've pulled it out their arse. That's their logic.
It's like, it is. It's just a finger in the air. It's like when we used to do it in the film group, and you get a fucking 6.8, and you go, well, where's that come from?
Yeah. Have we banned that, or have we got 0.5s only? I can't remember what we did now in the film group.
0.5s.
Okay.
Yeah. If you can't decide, if it's not quite 9, it's just a little bit.
That's fair. That always felt like a good compromise to me.
Yeah,
Give people an out. If nothing else, AEW Fight Forever has potential. I'm happy to have a more arcade-style wrestling game, especially one based on a major promotion. The gameplay has a strong foundation, and when it's firing all cylinders, the action channels the simple fun of the 90s and early 2000s. The rest of the package just needs to catch up. Until it does, even the most passionate AEW fans may have a hard time sticking around for this main event. So, interesting that the core, according to Marcus, he enjoyed the core gameplay, but again, it's this lack of depth and things to do. It's another difficult one because I look at those fighting games that come out like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. They're usually heavily praised, but they have what they have. They have a story mode of sorts, which are varying in quality. They have 1v1 against the AI. They have online, ranked and unranked leaderboards. And then that's it. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And yet something like this is demanding more. And I think that's the pressure that WWE have put on their games because they've just got so many modes. They've got like a booking, a general manager mode. They've got a universe mode.
Yeah.
They've got 2 career modes. Like the feature set of that game has sort of set the standard. And if you come in below that and ask for similar prices, you get burnt.
Well, yeah, I guess, which is fair. What else can you say? Like, that's fair, isn't it? Like, you're always going to compare what else is out there, and the value you're getting.
It would be better if it had those. That's the thing. It would be better if it had more modes. So you can't say it'd be worse.
Not in 2023, she wouldn't.
No, wouldn't be. No, probably not. Didn't think of that actually.
Yeah, that saying doesn't hold water anymore.
No, interesting. Well, anyway, that's AEW Fight Forever. Sitting on a 65. I will probably... Well, I think Paper's getting it or got it as well, but he's got it on that Switch.
Oh, my God.
So, I know he had a disaster because the order was delayed. So, again, these physical merchants getting costed like they should be. I was sitting there being able to play it days ago. So, when he gets his teeth into it, I'm sure we'll both play through the Road to the Elite, which is this career mode. And I wanted to try something that was just pick up and play, and I think this is going to fill that gap.
But we helpful to both them.
Yeah, because I've been lacking that recently. There's only so much time I can spend in other games. There's need to have a breakout now and again. So we'll be returning, I suspect, with our own opinions on this, and it'll probably be Mr. Paper, providing he hasn't cancelled the order and bail out of it. But like I said, he wants to go down with the ship anyway, so he's put his money where his mouth is at least. Anyway, this is Idle Game Chat, Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast. You've got Apps, which is me, and you've got Logan, who is him, FGL Grand Prix winner, and resident referee. Let's not forget that. That's still there,
it's
that title.
It's an unnecessary role, the ref.
It is. Keeps things ticking along, because I blow things consistently in that fucking quiz. It's fucking hard
to
work.
Keep what's going on with all that bollocks.
It is
even
hard
I struggle. And then you have to keep me in check, and you think, well, what am I doing here then?
Yeah.
Throwing doubt into the arena, if anything.
No, so we're here most weeks talking about video games and giving our impressions of games and hardware that you can play or play on today. Patreon.com/Dimp Digital is the place to go if you want to support the grassroots independent endeavour that is Dimp Digital. Now, let's do some headline surfing.
Yeah.
Here's one for you. PlayStation boss claims publishers unanimously dislike value-destructive Xbox Game Pass. So this is what Jim Ryan said during this FTC trial.
He's getting really pissy, he is. Like...
I mean, what a stat. I mean, this, first of all, it's nonsense. Unanimously dislike. Of course, unanimously don't dislike. Maybe the ones he spoke to don't like it, but... Even in there's people come out and other publishers saying no, we like it. Yeah, it's fine for us because we get given money for doing very little, and our sales haven't been impacted. Like Football Manager, for example, that's one of the guys that has kind of said it. But we knew that this thing would start producing these sort of quotes and these sort of bits and pieces that are coming out, and there'll be more statements to read. But I can see what Jim's trying to suggest here. Because we've always questioned the longevity of a subscription service when you're not going to market and selling at retail. And if you're someone like let's say if you're someone like EA who makes most of your money on retail sales and a la carte sales, you probably would say, yeah, we don't really want everything to go day and date into a subscription service. However, we don't mind it going a year later because, you know, we get a little bit of extra money to a game that was not selling at that point. But yeah, talk to us about Jim and his pissiness. He's under pressure. He's on the stand. He's coming out of this bollocks.
Throwing mud, isn't he? That's what he's doing.
Is that not the name of the game here, though? Once you're in these situations, you're in that stand.
I wouldn't mind, but they all like to play this good guy, like, character, if you like. And say
I don't know if Jim does, though. Friend of the show, Phil, does. Like, he's always...
I think Jim has tried to portray this underdog, you know, fighting valiantly against the behemoth Microsoft and this, that and the other. And it turns out they're just fucking chucking money left, right and centre at different like places to get, and different devs, publishers, whatever you want to call them, to get exclusives, keep them exclusive. Like,
lock them down.
What they can to keep as much as they can console exclusive on theirs. And then just throwing mud at Sony going, you're destroying value. What do you mean destroying value? You're the first ones to charge £70 for a video game. Like,
yeah.
It's just pot kettle and mud throwing just to distract, I think, a lot of the time from what their own shortcomings are. And I'm just getting a bit sick of Jim at the minute. I mean, I'm sick of Phil's shit games, for a start. I just want to say that. Like, at least Jim's chucking out good games, but he's just a pissy little bastard, and I'm getting sick of him. Might just chuck this console out the window just to spite him.
He's already got the money, though, isn't he?
Well, he ain't going to get the money for Spider-Man if I do that, is he?
No. He will, though, because you'll buy another one and be like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
I've got to play that now.
So if anything, I've done him a favour. But,
no,
I'm just getting a bit wound up with it. Like, I don't understand why have a go, particularly at... I mean, look, Game Pass is very consumer friendly. Like, and if you use it to its... Not even to its fullest, but I've said before, if you play one game a month on there, you're getting your money's worth.
Yeah.
And you definitely will get your money's worth. Most people will.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's good value for the consumer. And then you've got Jim coming out going, oh, it's not. Well, no one likes it unanimously.
Well, the part he's talking from corporate, isn't he? Like, no. They don't like it because it potentially means less money for them. Value destructive.
Well, that's what I mean. They're basically saying that people
for the multi
spending £50 on a game, they're getting it for quote unquote free or whatever.
Mate,
it's part of the subscription.
Rental service, isn't it?
But arguably, if I got that for a year, soon it's going to cost me going up to £17 a month or something. So nearly £200 a year for that. So we talk about value destruction, but only if I play 5 games, 4 or 5 games a year does it really equate out. To stop talking shit, Jim, you're just getting pissy because they're just giving people stuff day and day without going out to shop and getting it.
Yeah.
He could do the same thing if he wanted to, but he don't want to because he'd rather get the £70.
Yeah, he wants the 70 UK pounds.
Of course he does.
Football Manager boss challenges Jim Ryan's claim that Xbox Game Pass is value destructive. Sports Interactive's Miles Jacobson says being on Game Pass is, quote, all very sunny. That's what I mean. That's what the fact that he said I know what he's saying because he may well only speak to the big fish and they all agree that it's a fucking pain in the arse because it's cutting into their sales.
Yeah.
So the unanimously dislike may well be true from that perspective. I think what he's not qualified is that he's only spoke to 2 or 3 big publishers, whereas immediately you've got people from Sports Interactive who do, to be fair, does Football Manager need Game Pass? No, it was very successful on its own, selling a la carte, Scottish audience, which comes back for the most part every year. But what Game Pass has done is it's been able to expand their audience. There's people that perhaps wouldn't have given it a try. They've gone, bloody spreadsheet simulator. I've not got any interest in that. And it's appeared on that. It's also been on the Apple Arcade. The version of that's gone on. And he's quoted as saying they've seen player increase and their sales haven't been hit. You know, they're still making as much money as they were before. So it's really just adding more potential fans to the franchise. And that's the best case scenario, isn't it? Of putting these sort of games on there.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, it's I'm a big fan of making things accessible, and it's not just because I'm a Football Manager fan. It's just because it's just a no-brainer. And the best thing I like, the version of Football Manager as an example that's gone onto the Xbox, isn't the full fat version. It's about an 80% version. So they've gone and done something and got, as you say, the Pee-wees of the world that wouldn't have otherwise played it, really, playing it. And they've got a whole new player base from it. And I think, and Sports Interactive these days are not a small fish. They're a pretty big fish, in comparison to like a Blizzard or whatever. They're not, but they're a lot bigger than they used to be. It used to be 2 people that developed bloody Football Manager, and now they're like a team of 40, 50 people or more. I think it's definitely a good thing. I think a lot of people appreciate it. I think it gives exposure to publishers and developers that otherwise wouldn't. I'm not going to say it's doing the world a favour. Microsoft are raking in a load of dough from it, but ultimately, as a service, it's I think it's one of the best things that's come out for gaming and making gaming accessible, financially viable for a while.
Absolutely. What do you think of this one? Actually, I'm going to ask the question first.
Go.
This is, again, you've caught me out several times, so it's your turn. Hopefully you haven't seen this in passing.
Right.
How much do you reckon The Last of Us Part 2 costs to develop?
$200 million.
Interesting. What about Horizon Forbidden West?
$150 million.
Interesting. So, here's the headline. Poorly redacted Sony documents. So some fucking idiot, when they've done the redactions, I don't know what they use, but basically when you scanned it in, the light shone through and exposed the redacted areas of these documents. Poorly. I know. Well, you've done a bit of like studying on law and stuff. I mean, I don't know if you've ever covered things like redactions, but obviously certain things in court documents are redacted for sensitive business reasons, and that's the reason why they've done it. And whoever's done it is has blown it.
The intern doing that, haven't they? And they've gone,
I mean, whoever's done that's going to have hell to play. But poorly redacted Sony documents reveal The Last of Us Part 2, and Horizon sequels cost $200 million plus.
Right.
So this is dollars. Horizon.
I chucked out something ludicrous there. There's no way it's going to cost that.
No. Horizon Forbidden West cost $212 million to make. 300 employees over 5 years. Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million and was 200 people over 5 years. Is that a shocking statistic to you, or not really?
I don't really know. I mean, when I said it, it felt like it was, but now I'm thinking, if it takes 5 years of a team of 300 people, is that really? That's just probably reasonable, to be fair.
Well, if they're sitting on it for 5 years,
it's still a lot. I mean, how much do these films cost?
Well, I was just looking into that, and I mean, obviously the lists that we've got are all the higher ones, but the production budgets can range from Avatar: Way of the Water, like the big dog, fucking 460 mil. So that's a silly. Let's find something that's around the 200 mil mark. Titanic, but that was back in 1997. It's Cameron again. Spider-Man: No Way Home, a bit more recent. That was 200 mil. King Kong, 207 mil. So it ranges. I mean, there's not a great deal of films that it seems like 200 mil appears to be is quite a lot sitting around that sort of area. But
in my head, I'd expect a film to cost more. Is that? I don't know what I'm basing that judgment or assessment on. I don't know. I just think the idea of having to get a big actor in, and
that's the cost. Scenes, I think the putting together of it, the production, is probably cheaper, but it's the talent, like you said, the director, the movie stars that you want to put into it. The Dark Knight, 185 mil. I mean, again, it's an older type jobby, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because they gross quite a lot of money, some of these. And
they do. I mean, they do, but it's just, I don't know. I don't know. I'm now caught between this thought train between what should be more expensive. I mean, they both cost what they cost, and they're different things. You have to get voice actors in, and all that kind of stuff. But you're operating in a digital world, like a virtual world, aren't you? You're not dealing in, using the Dark Knight or whatever as an example. They blew up a bloody hospital. Like,
was that not CGI'd?
Well, no. So we digress.
Yeah.
But you know the scene where
spoilers
walking out,
he's
pressing the clicker,
and
it only part goes off, and then he sort of looks at it and shakes it and goes, and it blows up again. It wasn't meant to do that. When he clicked it, it was meant to all blow up.
Oh,
so that bit there where it doesn't blow up is just kind of like
it happened.
It just happened, and they filmed it, and they were like, "That works." So they obviously can't put the fucking building back up and try again. So they were like, Heath Ledger just carried on acting, and they were like, "That works better." We're happy with it, but that scene wasn't meant to happen that way.
Interesting. Wow. Anyway, they're the budgets for Sony's games, 200 mil.
Yeah.
I think generally is higher than the average. I think that's what this is, because we don't really know.
Interesting to see what some of the other, how much do you reckon, like something like Starfield?
That's the thing, yeah. I mean, it's all a little bit murky, because how much money of that was, because who was working on it at what time? Like, usually these projects are doing other things, aren't they? Like, were 300 people on it for 5 years all the time? Absolutely not. It was fluctuating up and down. People were leaving. People were coming off other projects and joining the project halfway through. It's all a little bit. Someone's sitting there doing the numbers and has a gamble, didn't they? They have a guess and say, "We reckon it cost this, Jim." Can't tell you exactly because we're not tracking every penny, but and they're like, "Look, we believe this is what you spent on this." So when it comes to profits, they'll probably just use that number and say, "Well, how much have you made versus how much was spent?" But yeah, I mean, there is definitely a. I mean, the former PlayStation America's boss, Sean Layden, this was a few years ago. He basically said that his view is that it's unsustainable, the costs of creating modern blockbusters, and he oversaw the development of Last of Us Part 2. So his view was that whilst this is great, it's taking 5 years minimum at this stage, and it's costing 220 mil, which means you've got to earn your keep, but it's going to be harder, isn't it, to make a profit off that? And it's like
that's why you get these games now at 70 quid.
Well, yeah, that it does the margin, doesn't it? We spoke about
that. Is also interesting. So 200 mil to make a film. You go and see it. You get an hour and a half from it, and you spend 15 quid.
If you're lucky.
From these games, if you're lucky, you spend £70 and get 20, 30, 40 hours or upwards of gameplay. So they charge more, but it's, if you say by the hour or for the product, you arguably get more value then from the game.
Yeah. I think that's always been
looking at it.
That's always been the argument on the game side, isn't it? That value-wise, even though it's more, you typically get in theory more hours out of it. But so last gen games had reached between 80 million and 150 million for AAA games, and here was his quote back in the day. The problem with that model is it's just not sustainable. I don't think that in the next generation you can take those numbers and multiply them by 2 and think that you can grow. I think the industry as a whole needs to sit back and say, all right, what are we building? What's the audience expectation? What is the best way to get our story across and say what we need to say? He left. So his views obviously didn't coincide with what Big Jim had at the time, and he left. He'd been there for a couple of decades, but it's interesting. This just shows that the budgets are ballooning, particularly on the Sony side. But I would argue, I mean, I've played both those games. There is a difference. You notice it. You simply, and it's mainly production. On whether it's facial animations or whether it's graphical fidelity, it's stuff like that where you do notice, and you can argue whether you need to do that to make a great game experience. And I think there's a valid conversation to be had there. Like, do games need to be looking as good as these two games?
Yes.
Do they though?
I prefer it. Certainly. I think everyone. Yeah, there's no.
if we take ourselves out of the funding of it and how much it costs, there's no negative to us to having a game looking better than it would have done. I suppose the question is it a necessity, or could we just get away with scaling back a little bit and have the same enjoyment of the game? The game plays and feels exactly the same. It just doesn't look quite as good, and will eventually those eyes are yours.
6 years then. I don't need to do a console every 6 years then. And this is the point. Like, surely they want to continue. Like, if I was developing, when I'm playing games, I want to watch and notice the progress since the last one I played, or the whatever it might be. When I've played God of War Ragnarok, I want to see how that's come on since God of War. I don't want to just be playing a different story with the same looking game. Like, you want to see how technology and the new consoles and everything can give you that extra little bit. So define, don't need. I think that's the tricky part is, ray tracing and all this kind of bollocks that's coming up and all these words. Frame rates. And we were getting frame rates that are coming out of 30. We're going backwards.
Well, I was playing Final Fantasy 16 this past week and actually put it on the 30 FPS mode for a little while. It wasn't that bad.
Right.
Dare I say it?
It's not that bad, but it is worse.
Well, and then we're getting off on a tangent here, but with Final Fantasy 16...
Pulling him over.
It's slightly... I'm not deciding whether it's better or worse, because on the frame rate mode, the performance mode, it's somewhat distracting when the frames drop.
So it's not consistent.
It's not consistent. So when you're in combat, it's smooth silk. It's completely. I think they dump the resolution down, but because everything's going on, you don't notice it. But when you're just wandering around places, there's a bit of judder there occasionally, and then Ronnie gets annoyed with it. So I put it on the frame rate of the quality mode, and I thought, well, let's see how long I can last before I'm physically sick. With just playing at 30. And initially, I moved the camera. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick with it for a couple of chapters. And I did. By the end, I'll be honest, I'd almost forgotten.
So you 100% adapt.
Yeah.
There's no. It's not noticeable till the end of time. But
no.
If you're playing, this is the problem. If you go to that and play a couple of chapters, and you've gone from saying that's 100 frames, 90 frames, and you go to that that's locked at 30, you're literally getting a third of the frames.
Yeah.
And that's what they're up against. It's not even just on some games now you're getting half the frames. You could be getting a third to a quarter of the frames that you are on other games. And that's my issue with it, is that it's 60 is the standard. And I'd argue that it's also sometimes difficult to notice above 60, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But the further down it gets, the more noticeable it becomes. It's not unplayable, but depending on the type of game, if I was playing Rocket League and went from 90 frames to 30, I'd be like, right, this is poor. But there are some games and some ways you can get around it. But just objectively, a game is better. It's running at a higher, consistent frame rate.
Absolutely. But as I said I think it was last week, we were talking about this, or maybe it was the week before. I think we're on the precipice of it going back to 30 for these bigger, better looking games. And this Final Fantasy 16 is another example where they're just struggling slightly already. And it
not happy about it.
Well, I would, as I said, I'm not happy about it either. But having hands-on experience, it wasn't as terrible as I was.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
You will get used to it. But I mean, if Call of Duty comes out and it's not at least 60, that's a disaster because it's a Twitch shooter. And Final Fantasy 16 is on the edge of that because it is an action game. But I think things like first-person shooters kind of need to aim for that 60 if that's the main combat of the game. I think that's always going to be the case. They will make the compromise either for fidelity or for scope to make sure that it feels silky smooth, because that's what's key to those sort of games. But we'll see. Anyway, that's the budgets of Sony's toot. Other stuff that came out of this was that basically Microsoft had a short list of every developer and publisher in the world at one point to acquire, from Sega to Square Enix to other smaller bits and pieces. So I don't think there's any surprise there. They've been shortlisting and looking for acquisition targets and then decide to go and spend the money. That's not at all surprising. Moving out of the FTC bollocks, because I don't actually know when or if a decision is going to be rendered on this, but obviously when that happens, that'll be a more substantial talking point. But here's another headline. This is in the show because we did talk about this a few weeks ago and had to make speculation based on cryptic comments. Now we pretty much have it in black and white, and those that were defending the Xbox Series S now may have to take a knee here. Baldur's Gate 3 studio says studio may have to, quote, compromise to get it on Xbox. The hold-up is due to split-screen co-op running poorly on the Series S. So we've criticised the Series S in the past, saying it's going to, at some point, start being a pain in the arse. And it's not widespread. We must also caveat, this is one of the first games for this to happen. And in the grand scheme of things, that we know of, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not been widely reported. But certainly, there is smoke to this particular fire. And whether this is a Canadian wildfire or just a small bonfire in your back garden will depend on your perspective. But I think it's just interesting to get some clarity from the developers, because the guessing and the cryptic kind of messages that we've had previously led us to believe this was the case, but not come right out and said it. And this is to do with a policy that Xbox don't want you to release, say, Baldur's Gate 3 on the Series X, which has split-screen co-op, and Series S doesn't have it. They don't mind if your resolution's lower, your frame rate's lower, the game runs worse, but the features need to be within parity. That's what Phil was asked for. So yeah, is an evidence of a studio struggling to fit that in, and it's now costing the release date of Baldur's Gate 3, because it's been moved back a little bit on PlayStation, but the date for Xbox is still not there at all, and it's coming to PC first. So thoughts on this? I mean, we may well have discussed this last time, but this is now the confirmation of a small issue starting to percolate. And also, we talked about the generation shifting towards 30 frames as things get more and more taxing on these machines. You'd have to think this may be a problem in 2-3 years' time that rears its head again for Series S, because as developers get more greedy with their resources and want to push the boundaries, they're going to have this thing sitting there and be like, right, we got to make sure it runs on that and has the feature parity that Phil's asking us for. Yeah,
I mean, that's a tricky task, isn't it, from Phil?
I get why they've done it, because they obviously think there's a market below 450 quid to get people in, get them on Game Pass, and you can have a Game Pass box for under £300, which is appealing for
from a business model perspective. You don't want. You could say to people, look, you ain't going to get, as you say, the sort of visuals that you get, be able to play the same game, the same. Like, I completely get that from a business model perspective, that it's difficult to sell people if they're not going to have certain features. But at the same time, like local co-op, like what are we really that fussed about that? Like that'd be my question if I was sitting there, Phil. I'd be going, do we really care? Like, is that a game breaker for us? But I suppose optically they'll get people who jump in and go, oh look, you're having to make concessions. We told you that S was shit, this, that, and the other. But I think we've speculated before that it's held back games, or the ones that are being developed across multiple platforms and things. They're struggling to basically account for the lack of grunt on that S. And I think this is kind of proving that it's a continued challenge, because it's almost, I guess in some ways it's almost like another console.
Yeah, it is.
Because it is fundamentally, it's, running the same software and it shares some similarities with the X, but it's fundamentally they're trying to adapt it to a different console, and it must have some complexity to doing so. Fucking bin it.
Should they do a Series S equivalent next gen?
I mean,
it depends on the metrics, because ultimately, if the business says that they've made headway with a cheaper console, they'll keep it. But
yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head exactly. If they're making money out of it, they're going to do it. And you'd argue that considering they continue to get all games on there, that you'd expect they are making money from it, and it's a continually viable business model. So, I mean, it's frustrating from a gaming perspective, because you kind of feel like you're being held back. But as I've said before, you can understand why they're doing it because it's money, right?
Yeah.
It's a different market that you've got there.
Yeah. It's interesting, but we knew this would eventually start to rear its head, and I'm sure they'll get there, just that it might take a bit longer. And I guess the concern is, how does this start happening more often? Is this an anomaly of sorts? We'll probably never know, because very rarely do we get an insight into this.
Yeah.
But they've had to address it because they once they said there's no exclusivity deal with PlayStation, it's like, well, why is it not on Xbox? And it's like, well, we're struggling to get this thing running, and it's, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, the fans want to know what's going on. The
reality is the reality.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, we can't get it on this piece of shit console at the minute. Like, we're struggling to do what Phil's asked us to do. He's given us the impossible job and said, make it work.
Yeah. Well, let's kill it off there. Run its course, I reckon. What do we treat the audience to next? We're getting into the dregs of very old stuff.
I was going to say, we haven't recorded some new stuff for a while.
No, that's my fault. Was it my fault this week? Or was it your fault? I can't remember. We was going to get some new stuff in.
I'd forgot, and you had...
I didn't
got something
chase.
else that cropped up. Well, no, I think you text me going, no, I can't do that because I've got to do something else. I was like, all right, I'd forgot anyway. So you'd have texted me and gone,
yes,
ready, and I would have been like, whoa.
Well, I'd forgotten. Yeah, fair enough. So we've got to start. Just look at the date of when this was recorded. 7th of June, 2022. It's over a year old.
Christ.
Unpacking, Logan. Do you remember that one?
Was that a year ago?
Yes.
What has happened? How was that a year ago?
I know.
That's mad.
Going to treat the audience to that. A little half-hour session of unpacking. I don't even know it's on Game Pass anymore.
It might well be, just about.
Let's have a look. Unpack it. It's still on there. Okay, because we'll reference that, because that's how we played it back in the day. But this was an interesting one, because I don't know if you remember, I played it and gave my view on it, and then it sort of twigged your interest. You was like, I've got to try this. And you went off and played it, so we recorded like a little bolt on at the end where you gave your impression. So Unpacking is finally getting its time in the limelight. Look, just to give you an insight, we've got Spiritfarer there, still lurking.
Christ.
Supraland.
No one wants to hear about that.
Tinykin.
I mean, it's the dregs.
That was the dregs, wasn't it?
Yeah, the ultimate dregs.
Yeah, they're all coming up to around a year old, but I need to think of a better production pipeline, but it allows us to put feet up, but yeah. Just I thought I'd just expose the business slightly there. This particular impression is over a year old now.
That's mad. Absolutely mad.
Oh, well, the audience don't mind. And if they do mind, they're not putting hand in pocket, most of them, so they ain't going to get anything out of it.
Consider yourselves lucky.
Consider yourselves lucky. I will say, actually, I was checking the audio podcast, but first things first, the fucking YouTube stats are awful at the moment. Gone right down the fucking toilet. I don't know what YouTube's playing at. I don't think they like it when you use the word cunt. I've heard that they occasionally scam for that in certain bits and pieces and block it out of algorithms and whatnot.
Oh.
So that might be
Good
a
word,
version
though.
why it is a good word. I know the Americans don't like it, but in these shores it's seen as a quite the sometimes a term of endearment, actually.
Well, it's just a perfect word for certain. Like, I think it conveys, like a certain thought, emotion, perfectly.
Yeah.
It's just so blunt as well. Like, it's just done.
It will just
Deal with
sting
that.
people. But our split now. So we used to have India, didn't we, as our top market.
Yeah.
India's now only got 18% market share.
Where have we gone to?
UK is 38.36 and the US is 37.6. So it changes month to month, but those two are battling it out to see where the top market is. But the audio numbers have gone up pretty nicely in the last couple of months.
Interesting.
Seen almost since sort of the turn of the year a decent uptick in weekly and monthly listens. So I don't know what's happening there. Sometimes we get caught in some sort of algorithm, I think, for like Amazon Music, and it ends up just chucking up the numbers. I'd be interested to see if it holds up there, but I did want to call that out because YouTube, whoever's on YouTube these days listening to this, you ain't doing your jobs. Start sharing it because those numbers have gone down the shitter. And everyone can see those, so it's embarrassing.
I think
if you need to just open up a browser and put it on mute, do that.
Put it on mute.
I don't know, maybe that's one way of tricking it. Open up 4 browsers. I don't know if you can even do that. But no.
Mad.
Audio numbers are increasing, patrons are not, though. So again, that's really the key metric here.
That's where we want to see things cropping up.
No. Anyway, let's get out of here. Unpacking over a year-old impressions. We'll see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some more game impressions. I'm once again joined by our resident referee, Logan. He's going to be asking the questions to me about a little-known game called Unpacking. So I think we're just going to read the descriptions to start off because Logan's got no idea what this game is. I thought there's going to be a lot of people out there that won't have much clue what this is. But I feel like if we read the description, we'll see if that unearths any nuggets of information that Logan can sort of picture what's going on. And then obviously I'll be going through giving you my opinion of it. But this is taken from the website and the product description. So it says Unpacking, a Zen puzzle game about unpacking a life. Unpacking is a game about the familiar experience of pulling possessions out of boxes and fitting them into a new home. Part blocks fitting puzzle, part home decoration, you are invited to create a satisfying living space whilst learning clues about the life you're unpacking. Over the course of 8 house moves, that is ludicrous, sorry. I've moved once in my life, that's one too many times. Bloody hell. Over the course of 8 house moves, you are given a chance to experience a sense of intimacy with a character you never see and a story you're never told.
Right.
Off you go.
What? Why are we playing this then?
Right, so that's a good point. Why am I playing this? So one, I had heard that it was relatively short and that it was an interesting, unique kind of game. It was on Game Pass. I played it on PC Game Pass for reasons I'll get into, and I just heard buzz about this indie game sort of on the underground of the enthusiast sort of circles that I'll watch from afar. I'd heard that this is a worthwhile sort of look at your time, and I thought, well, look, it's on that Game Pass. We know it's short. I am coming off the back of a bigger game that I'd finished in Horizon Forbidden West. And I like these palette cleansers. Yeah, I like these little shorter games, something a bit different that's just going to cleanse the palette, so that if I want to go into a more robust or bigger experience, I've at least had a taste of some other bits and pieces. So that was the rationale behind it, and I just heard excellent things about it. So I thought, well, let's go for that, and that's how we ended up with Unpacking, getting downloaded on PC Game Pass and played over the course of a couple of sessions.
I like these little palette cleansers, as you've called them. I've never really thought about this before, but that's arguably what they are. And I think in between every Assassin's Creed DLC or game I've played some shitter in the middle, like Donut County.
Yes, that is a palette cleanser.
I'll do one of these little palette cleansers. So it's interesting that you refer it to that, because that's how I do it. Kind of like something small to break up big games.
I've been caught out by this before, though, because I thought Spiritfarer was going to be a palette cleanser, and it was 30 hours long.
Well,
so although it was a palette cleanser in terms of it was different, I was like playing another full game again. I was like, bloody hell, I didn't expect it to be this long. So research not done there on my behalf, and I got snarled up and caught out.
well, Yoku's Island Adventure or whatever I'm playing at the minute is turning out, that was meant to be a palate cleanser post Assassin's Creed, but it's turning out not to be that.
No. Yeah.
So they can easily spiral. But that's interesting. So you played this on PC, which is a bit of a breakaway for you at the minute. Most stuff is console based. What made you want to play it on PC over console? Was there any particular reason?
Basically, I'd seen how the game operated on videos and read up how it works, and it is a drag and drop game. And I thought, I just can't imagine having to get around that on a controller. And I did a similar thing with 12 Minutes last year, but that one I actually started on the Xbox. Honestly, I played it for 60 seconds, and I was like, oh no, this needs a mouse. Like you can play it like this, but this is not the way to be doing it. And I felt like I was going to have the same experience there. So rather than just wasting my own time, I thought I'll just go straight on the PC. I know, you've got a little mouse cursor that you move around and pick things up and put them there. It's like there's no other way. I didn't try the console version, so I won't speak on it. But for me, if you've got access to something with a mouse, you can plug a mouse in, I think these days, to most of these consoles, then do that. But absolutely was like, right, this feels like that's the best way to play it. So let's not get snarled up in negative vibes early on.
No, your PC's easily got enough power to do something like that, so it's a bit of a no-brainer. But I've literally got my Xbox on my desk, so I played Football Manager, for example, the console version. Just plug the mouse into it. It's literally plug and play, and off you go. So I guess for people that don't have a PC to access, they could do that if they've got a Series X. I don't know if you could do it on the PlayStation. I presume you can, but
these days, but. You're missing out on that dual sense if you're doing it on the PlayStation. So,
right. So, I genuinely know nothing. I'm sort of trying to think where do we start. So, talk me through what sort of game is it? Is it just at a heart a puzzle game that you're solving the puzzle, where it's got some bullshit narrative of life around it that they've constructed to make it playable?
Yeah, so they don't. So to be fair to the story, they don't really. Nothing's explicitly told you. Like it's not lying when it says a story you're never told. It don't tell you nothing. You just pick up items. The character will move into the university dorm or whatever it is, and you will recognise that you're the same person. So you're like, oh, I've moved out of the parents' home, out of my room, and so it's telling the story of this character through the locations and the objects. And there's some cute things, there's a little doll and a bunny or a fluffy toy that comes with on each of the different outings, and it gets more and more, it gets damaged and it gets older and worn and stuff. So that it's not like here's what's going on. Clarice is now 26. It gives you the year, so it gives you a sense of we've skipped 2 years, we've skipped 5 years, we've skipped one, whatever it might be. Other than that, you kind of left to work out what's occurring on your own. And to be honest, you can almost mark this game as in the category of just one that I just did not get. I didn't get any of the story, any of what they were trying to tell me. I just washed over me because I was treating it as a puzzle game. So all this bollocks they wrote in the description about part home decoration, I did not give a fuck where things went. As long as it was out of the fucking box and on a desk somewhere, much like my real home. It's it's out, it's fine, I don't care what it looks like. And so I was just playing it like that, almost speed running it, going, all right, get all this shit out. And there are certain elements where objects can only be put in certain, in certain areas, on a shelf, for example, where there's not a lot of depth. You can't put a great big jug there because it would slip off. So you can only put thinner items. And there's only so many, spaces for thin items. And you have to make sure you're putting things in the appropriate area. And some stuff goes in the, you get out the box and it's in the bedroom box, but actually it needs to go in the bathroom. It's a toothbrush. So you just sort of move screens and then chuck it in there. So I was playing it like that. So all this story stuff that, I've read things like how incredible the story is and it tells a really heartful story. I don't know what's going on. I ain't got a clue. I've got no no
Was
idea.
that from start to finish?
Yeah, I had no idea what happened. I sort of done the ending, and I was like, what the hell's happened here? Got a rough idea how old this person is. Okay, there's a cot, so I've had a kid. So what? I need to get these fucking boxes unpacked. I didn't feel like the character. I felt like a removal man, like just wanting to get the job done. Do you know what I mean?
When we've done this, you have to go back and listen to it. Like, and what you're describing is the jug that you're getting out of a box can't go on a certain shelf.
Yes.
Like, it's just bizarre. It's just like honestly, out of all of these that we've done, this is the most bizarre one we've done yet. Where you're telling me about the story or the principle of the game is to unbox a box. Figure out whether this thing fits on the shelf or not.
Yes.
And if it's a toothbrush, it has to go in the bathroom.
Yeah.
These sound like things that I have to deal with every day.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and you know that's the crux of it. I'm being crude and oversimplifying it, but then, you know that's how I ended up just playing it, and then it ended, and I was like, oh, okay. So that's a sort of a whistle-stop tour of unpacking. Like, I found it. I don't want to rag on it, but I found it pretty mundane. Like as I've described it there. You know, we talk about Biff. He takes things literally. Like I feel like I was in like his head, just doing this. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like it was,
what a place to be.
Yeah, it was. It was bizarre. I was like, normally I can get behind all this stuff. I'm like, oh no, I see what they're trying to do there. But I was like, no, I just want this fucking jug to be.
Do you think that's because it was poorly executed, or for whatever reason you just weren't?
Look,
it just didn't click with you.
It just didn't click with me. There's you know, you can read other opinions on this, and you'll find people that really enjoyed it. They found it peaceful. They found it, you know, satisfying. They understood what was going on with the time jumps, and they picked up on the small nuances and changes in the items that were coming out. So, the characters now at this stage in their life, etc., etc. It's just washed over me, and sometimes that happens. I don't know if it's a problem with me or the game or what, but I can only give you my perspective in that it just didn't resonate with me whatsoever. And you know, it's the way I described it sounds mundane, and that's how my brain and how Ronnie and me went through it. Like we just went through it and was like, oh, that's done. Yeah, that's done. And the other thing as well, and this is, you know, could be another personal thing, but I've never had a game hurt my hands so much. Like moving a mouse around and clicking and dragging and clicking and dragging and moving them. Honestly, I was like, I have to stop and be like, oh God.
Really?
Well, because it's so repetitive. It's like, you know, you're just repeating these very mundane movements. At least when like you're at work, you've got a fucking keyboard and you can stretch your fucking ligament. Like this was like click, move, double click there. Click. I was like, good Lord. Honestly, it hurt my hand. I was like, what is going on here? So
I mean, I can understand if you're doing first-person shooter competitive online multiplayer. I've never heard of someone playing a casual, relaxing experience puzzle game that's ended up hurting their hand.
Yeah, it was hurting after a while. So it should have come with a advisory, a warning. It probably did. I didn't read it. But if you got, honestly, I'm not joking. If you've got, maybe this is the problem. Maybe I was trying to do it too quickly, therefore put unnecessary sort of, you know, work into my hands, and then you know the result of that is that things washed over me because I wasn't engaged with it. I was just like mechanically playing the game and just going. So that might, you know, maybe it's all coming together in that the way I played it. You know, I wasn't trying to rush it. I had time on my hands. I was just playing it as I felt like I wanted to. I could see they wanted me to start putting things in order. Like I could see there's room for you to have like a little bit of creative like input to where things go. So you get a poster and it's like, I'll put that on the wall. It's like, oh, that's the poster of the favourite band. You put that behind the bed or on the side wall. Do you line it up exactly? Like there are things in there. I know people would play this and be really anal about everything's got to go in its right place. But I just never got to that stage. But that's more of a commentary on the way I live anyway. Like I don't be caring for that sort of stuff. I ain't got the patience for it. I haven't, like, just it doesn't matter if it's symmetrical. Just chuck it up there, get it out of the way.
To be fair, though, I think there's a natural, and it goes with any puzzle game, whatever it is. Whenever I do my daily Wordle, the idea is to get in as quickly as you can in as least guesses, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with any puzzle game. There's natural satisfaction in solving it as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
Whatever that, And the idea of the puzzle is to solve the puzzle, not in the way that you solve the puzzle or with the care that you put into it. It's a natural thing that people do. So if they're trying to balance the game between you taking your time and enjoying the anal element of it versus just solving the puzzle, I think you're always going to find that people will breakneck it because everyone naturally, and you're ingrained to do it from when you're a kid, to solve this puzzle as quickly as you can. Everyone does it naturally, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's the criticism of Ronnie particularly.
No, and it's short, so if people do want to play this, it's not going to take up a lot of their precious time. There is a certain like charm to it, I guess. It's it's very simplistic in its design in terms of it's an isometric kind of nice art style. Although sometimes I struggle to tell what the objects were that I was getting out of the box. Like they weren't always overly clear exactly what it was. It signposts you quite well on where you need to go to fix potential issues. So if there's a room with the wrong objects in it, it'll flash red in the sort of like this little like map menu. So you can go to that room and say, okay, that goes there. It won't let you get into a bit, banging your head against a brick wall, but it becomes quite apparent where things need to go. But just one of those things I didn't get and didn't played it, finished it, and I was like, how strange. I don't think I have much more to say, to be honest.
I did it, I played it, found it mundane, and went,
yeah. It's a shame, but it happens sometimes. I can only be honest with what my experience was.
It's very rare with you, I think, because you do an element of research and recommendation goes into it up front, and obviously you don't often go into things clueless, for want of a better term. You either decide that it's for you or not based on other people's playthroughs or from reviews, whatever it is. You make a decision. Very rarely do you get into a game and go, nope, didn't. I played it all and it just didn't work for me and I don't know what happened. That is a rarity for you. So I think it's at least succeeded on that basis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you said you got nothing else to add just before we go, just in case something we move on, has something else come to mind?
No.
No AOB, nothing else.
Nothing.
So, I guess we then have to take a walk into the gallery. And
say, you know what? I'll cut you off. We're not going to take a walk into the gallery. We're just going to shut up shop for the day and say, sorry, Unpacking, you're not coming in. And then that'll be that. Save everyone's time, shall we?
Full stop. We don't even. I've started to open the door. You've instantly just pulled it closed and gone, don't even bother. I'll lock it up again.
Don't bother today.
Pull the shut.
We'll have the day off. Yeah. So, Unpacking doesn't make its way into my gaming gallery. So, unfortunate
slightly
for Unpacking.
Disappointed, to be honest. I am slightly disappointed. For such a bizarre game, for a bizarre review, it feels like it deserves a place in there just for that alone.
Maybe, but nah.
Do you know what? In a weird kind of way, despite what you've just said, I'm tempted to go off and download it and play it.
It's light work at the end of the day. So
how many hours do you reckon you spent on it?
No more than 4. Like I think you get it done in like 2.5 to 3 is the closer one. Like it's one of those games you could do in one night. It's just that like my hand was hurting after the first few hours. I was like, I'll take a break here. And I came back and it was done. I think it's only like 8 levels or something. It's not, not,
so each level will be a move.
That's it.
Different period of life.
Yeah, well, it even says in the description 8 house moves. So you kind of know how quickly you're progressing through it. It would be interesting to hear someone else's perspective on it, but
I think I will for the sake of a couple of hours just to see whether that resonates or not. So somehow, on the basis of what is arguably a negative review, it has gained a download, which is a really odd way of doing it.
Yeah, there you go. But Unpacking. I've done you a favour, spreading the good word, but no. I look forward to hearing your view on that if and when that takes place.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely circle back to that once I've done it, because it'd be interesting to see, even if we just spend 2.5 minutes on it, for 1 minute for every hour the game takes, just to see whether I go, yeah, you're completely right, I don't know what happened there, or whether I can go, Ronnie's lost the plot, because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the elements that people find really well executed is like understanding who this person is and what's going on in their life. Well, no, that's the thing. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't get that, so it never got itself into my head, and that it was just like I just didn't understand what was going on. So it's always
a place to go on shelves. What are we doing?
Well, exactly. That's what I did. I did it efficiently and got all the moves done. So happy customer, I'd say. If people want their moving to be done quickly, I can do it. Just get out the box, put it on the side, and I'll invoice you next week. VAT not included, so be prepared for that. Well, we're doing something a little bit out of the ordinary here. As the audience would have just heard or seen, Logan was suggesting that he might go off and play Unpacking, and I said, I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts on that when you do. Well, he did it a few days after we recorded, so I thought, well, what's the point in dragging him back in a few weeks' time? Let's just bung this on the end and get your view. I was not so kind to Unpacking, and you found it hilarious, my description and my view on it. This somehow inspired you to go off and play it yourself. I mean, it was on Game Pass, so no extra financial outlay there for you, but come on then, hit me with it. Are you in the same boat as me for the old Unpacking, or do you see it for what it's trying to be?
Do you know what? The reason that I went away and played it is because I thought he's going to have missed something here. Like, he's going to have... there's no doubt about it. He's just going to have... Something's going to glazed over him. It's obviously going to be a more sensitive story that he ain't, for whatever reason, ain't paying any attention to, that I think my feelers might pick up. No. Not at all. I couldn't believe the basicness, I guess, of it. I was waiting for that underlying thing to come up. I go, so that's what's going on. That's what we're like, and it never come, right? And even I was playing the game, and I was literally moving house simulator. I mean, just one thing that I found, right, is possibly the worst thing about moving, and you probably experienced it when you moved into your house, is seeing all these fucking boxes having to find homes for stuff.
Yep.
Right? And no one gets that and goes, this is good. So, and I've done this several times throughout my life. When I went to uni, moved to halls, I did all that kind of stuff, moved into my flat, moved into another flat, moved into my house. I've done that enough. I've done it like 8 times myself already in real life. And I must admit, doing it in the game felt no more satisfying. I thought that I would be more picky about where I put stuff than you would. Right. But I just found myself just going, it can go anywhere. I couldn't give a shit. I'll put that on there, as long as it's all right. One of the things that did annoy me, though, was there's certain things that have to go in certain places, right? The first level, I was stuck for about 15 minutes trying to find where a diary should go. I was almost at a point where I was going to message you and go, "What am I supposed to be doing? Something with the diary? Like,
am I supposed to read it or write in it?
Am I supposed to read? Yeah, I was genuinely thinking I'm missing something here, but no, it just had to go somewhere specific. And I was like, oh right, okay. So it's not even just me choosing where shit could go. Right. It's basically a guessing game then, is it? I've got to guess where everything should go according to where the game designers think it should go.
Yep.
So I had a little bit of fun with that throughout it, but...
What did you play it on?
Xbox.
So,
Xbox Series.
Did you play it with a controller, or did you plug the...
Didn't let me use the mouse.
So you couldn't do that. So you had to play it with controller, and I imagine it's just as bad as I would anticipate, i.e. you're moving the analog to control the mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, right, it's a PC game that's been put on an Xbox and given controller adaptation, which is fine. Like, it's not like I got a huge budget to do that, but I was surprised that I couldn't just... It just didn't take it over. I don't know why. I was expecting it to, but it didn't. No, so that was the first irritants. And then, I mean, it was manageable. I mean, it got a bit, there's a few times when my thumb got a little bit like weary of moving stuff around, like when you're moving saucer by saucer, cup by cup.
You snickered when I said my hand was hurting doing that.
I didn't. Do you know what? I really didn't appreciate the granularity of what they expected you to put. Like, I didn't expect I'd be putting all the cutlery in a drawer. I didn't expect I'd be doing all that kind of stuff. Like, I was surprised at the amount of stuff I had to put away.
Yeah.
Arguably there's some, you get to see how the teddy bears age and things like that. That. You go, oh yeah, I know. But I'd sort of go, oh, I've still got that fucking teddy bear then. Ain't chucked that away.
No.
There was stuff that I just genuinely didn't know what it was. So I think you said you could hover over it. I never found a way of figuring out what stuff was.
No, I don't think it ever tells you what it is. It's just some stuff I couldn't figure out either, and I just had to guess.
I was just surprised that even now, going into it, knowing there was a deeper layer to it, still didn't get that from the levels.
No.
It was weirdly satisfying, I guess, on a slightly more positive note. It was weirdly satisfying to put stuff in the right place, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know, but I didn't have any. There was no consequence to where I was putting stuff. I was just like, if it was my house, I'd go, right, okay, that needs to be lined up and that needs to be level. But I was just like, just stick it on the wall. That looks about right. It was a bit slapdash. But yeah, I completely agree with you.
Well,
and in every way of what you said, there's nothing that I disagree with what you said.
I mean,
I can't believe that.
I'll ask the question. There's people waiting outside the gaming gallery, seeing if we can unlock the doors and induct a new game into the gallery somewhere and into your personal wing. Unpacking. Are we going to unlock the doors and let people in? No.
I can't let that in there.
No.
I mean, at best, it could go into bronze. At best. But I think I'd come to regret looking at that in the gallery, to be honest. There was very few positives. I didn't hate my time playing it. I just don't understand why the game's been made. I don't understand why. Like, there's no overarching fun to it, like beyond putting shit away.
Yeah,
like, there isn't though.
No,
there just isn't.
Maybe some people find that therapeutic in some way.
That's what I thought. But
I told you this stuff's in boxes here.
Yeah, but why would anyone find unpacking like? If there was an overarching story of some sort where you could build a connection with that person and actually care about their belongings and their life, that would make it more plausible as a game. But ultimately, you couldn't give a shit, really. And I found myself putting everything. Like, nothing really changed either. It was always the same stuff in a different or similar place I was putting it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've done this 6 times now. Why am I doing it again?
Well, luckily there's only 8 times you've got to do it and then it's over, so...
I was relieved. On that last level, there's a lot of rooms. And I was thinking if I have to do another one with more rooms than this, I don't know if I'm going to get through it.
No. Well.
But yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. Disappointingly, as much as I wanted to go, you're a cold-hearted bastard. You didn't get that story, that nice little undercurrent that was going through it. I mean, no.
Didn't have a clue. Still don't really. I don't think I even looked it up. So there you go. Unpacking gets the doors double locked on it. So a bit of an embarrassment for those. Poor little Windy Stew. I think there's only 2 of them that did it, but as I said, sometimes we just don't get things.
If it ain't any good, call a spade a spade. Yeah. If it ain't any good, despite the fact that 2 blokes in a shed, whatever it is, worked on it, it still ain't any good.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
Sorry.
Anyway, Unpacking's not made its way into my gaming gallery. We'll be back on the next episode. We'll close this one down. Patreon.com/DimpDigitals, one place you can go if you want to financially support us. Twitch.tv/DimpDigital. Also, you can subscribe to our Twitch channel where we live stream the podcast and video game playthroughs. But if you want to just listen and watch free of charge, that's also fine. We're grateful to have you along for the ride. Nothing more for us to say here, though, other than thanks for your time and ta-ta.
This was a Dimp Digital production.